Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for everyone being here, whether you're listening or one of our amazing panelists or our Unidos and student council members. This is a wonderful event that I'm very happy to be a part of and so grateful that the students were able to put this together. This is our first time doing something like this, and technology being what it is, we had some hiccups. So if anything goes awry, we'll troubleshoot, we'll be able to figure it out. But thank you. I know there's some kind of blessing in COVID, knowing that everyone is in this together. So if we have technology issues, it certainly wouldn't be the first time, and it's not going to be the last time. So thank you so much. We will soon hear from our panelists a little bit about themselves and the nonprofits they work for. But we wanted to talk a little bit about our two clubs who helped put this together. But first, so I'd like to turn it over to Bella, and she can tell us a little bit about our Latinx Heritage Club or Latinx Affinity Club. So go ahead, Bella.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to tell you about Unidos en Poder. It was initiated by former LaSalle graduates, Leslie, and now known as Tino and Emily, with the intention to create a space where students felt welcomed and heard. In the beginning, we all hung out together, but never had an official name for our group. Tito was passionate to represent our people and wanted to start the club. Our goal is to bring together the Latinx community within the school and celebrate all the different cultures. We aim to show the diversity in our school similar to the efforts of the API and BSU.
Awesome, thank you so much. And now we'll hear from Mary Grace Mott, who will talk a little bit about how student council got involved and what her role is.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mary Grace Mott. I am this year's Officer of Service, and I am involved with the Executive Council as well as the Student Council that work hand in hand in doing everything faith, service, and community. And this is an idea we had to honor all of our affinity groups, such as Unidos, and we wanted to help bring awareness to the Latinx community through having this panel and morning activities for the sophomore class.
Thank you so much. And then we'll begin, as we begin all things, in our LaSallian school, and that's with prayer. So I'll turn it over to Josh Lee to lead us in prayer this morning.
Okay, let us remember
that we are in the holy presence of God.
Creator God, we thank you for your wondrous diversity, for our cultures, traditions, and languages, for all the ways we celebrate our humanity and praise your dignity. We value all people in this time. We celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. May we remember in our churches and the leaders, teachers, and theologians that have been part of our Christian faith tradition. May we continue to hear from diverse voices that speak the truth of God's love, peace, and justice for all people. Guide us in ways of new understandings to build a more inclusive church. In the name of Christ Jesus, our Savior, Redeemer, and friend, we pray. Amen. St. John Baptist de La Salle.
Pray for us.
Live Jesus in our hearts.
Forever. Thank you so much. So now we would like to introduce our amazing panelists. At any time during this conversation, so we have some parts that are scripted from our students, and we'll have that conversation that I'm guessing will take anywhere between 25 and 30 minutes. But anytime if any of our attendees have a question, the Q&A is on. So just go ahead and type it in there. But there'll also be time at the end to unmute yourselves and be able to ask the question live as well. So that will be taking place. You can do that kind of question thing throughout. But we're so grateful to have our panelists here. And again, we're going to have our students be able to introduce them. So we're going to start again, turning over things with Mary Grace. So go ahead, Mary Grace.
Hi again. I would love to start with welcoming Miss Manjeet Kaur from Unite Oregon to our panel this morning. Ms. Kaur is a Washington County organizer, and she will tell us a little more about what that means. So I'm going to hand it off.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me this afternoon. My name is Manjeet, and like Mary Grace said, I work at Unite Oregon as an organizer in Washington County and Clackamas County. So basically, Unite Oregon is a community organization that's led by immigrants, refugees, and folks of color. And kind of our mission is one rooted in social justice. So we do a lot of work in the community to advance policy work, but we also do a lot of direct service for some of the most vulnerable groups of people in our community. So That's kind of the work we do. And I'm excited to be here this afternoon with all of you. It wasn't too long ago that I was in high school. I just graduated college in the spring. So it's really cool to see young people, organizing towards creating spaces like this and having these sorts of discussions and being so excited to learn. So excited to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaur. Now I'd like to offer this time to Ms. Kat Kelly, who works with Catholic Church Charities, to tell us a little bit about herself. Ms. Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kat Kelly. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives with Catholic Charities of Oregon. So that means I work across all of our programs, which includes immigration legal services, refugee resettlement, farm worker housing, our intercultural counseling center, and our homelessness services. And I appreciate the conversation. We like to work with your school quite a bit, actually. We often do know your rights trainings for parents and other kinds of immigration legal consultations for folks. And we do a lot of workshops around DACA and other issues that are affecting young people in the school. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. We are grateful to have Brother Nick Gonzalez here with us this afternoon. Brother Nick is currently the assistant visitor for the San Francisco, New Orleans, LaSalle District. Brother Nick.
Did we lose him? Brother, did you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I thought I did. My name is Brother Nick, and up until a year ago, I was the principal and a teacher and a principal at Cathedral High School in El Paso, Texas. Before that, I was the principal of San Miguel High School in Tucson. And if you follow the news, those are two real hotspots on the frontera along the border that are just super important and in the news a lot. And so I appreciate the opportunity to educate every opportunity I can about the realities of those situations and to celebrate my Latino heritage.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Now we have a youth activist named Yadira Baltier Moreno, who is a part of many groups here in the Portland area, including the League of Minority Voters and MECA. I will let her speak a little bit more about herself. Yadira.
Hi, my name's Yadira. I'm an alumni from De La Salle North Catholic. I graduated in 2017. I'm a junior currently at Pacific University, which is located in Forest Grove. I did MECHA. I know you said MECA, but it's MECHA. I did that at PCC for 2 years. We did a lot of events that was centered around it wasn't just Mexican American issues, but it was also about like Salvadorian immigrants, Guatemalan immigrants, like all kinds of Latinx issues, because a lot of people focus on just like Mexicans, but Latinx is not just Mexicans. I also went to Holy Cross Catholic School and graduated there in 2013. And currently my youth activism is at Pacific University, since we've been having a lot of issues with the president and the dean of students, not students, the trustees. And I'm currently not doing MECHA anymore, but I'm the president of LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens. And it's a national organization. And we also do a lot of activism with Latinx and the Black population and other immigration and our other marginalized groups too. And I'm honored to also be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Yadi.
Thank you all so much for your introductions. I would like to begin with this question to the whole group. Why is it important to celebrate Latinx heritage, and what does Latinx heritage mean to you?
Can I say something just really quick?
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one to start this, but using the term Latinx, I think, is really, really important. I'm going to say that I use the term Latine because it's very hard to use Latinx when you're speaking Spanish. And that's the majority of the time that I use the term. Latinx is when I'm speaking to Spanish speakers. So I want folks to know that the term Latinx is really amazing. It's inclusive, it's important, but it's not a universal identity for everyone. And I think to the point that some of these folks have talked about, there's a lot of a very broad diversity within this community. So I want to make sure that folks are aware that that's an active conversation happening around that term, and that it's not just this like concrete, solid thing for everybody. And I just want folks to be, who are not necessarily part of the community, to be aware of that. So we're not imposing names on community. And I think the best way to do that is to interchange how we use those things, and to always go with what folks are asking and how they identify themselves. But I just wanted to throw that out there real quick, because one of my colleagues right before I started was like, don't forget that we always need to talk about that. And I was like, yes, thank you for reminding me. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
I think it's important to celebrate, and I applaud you for celebrating Latinx heritage, because I think it's a reminder that America is just this wonderful mezcla of different communities that in many cases, the Latinx were here before this country was a country. And yet others, like myself, my family didn't come to this country until emigrated from Mexico in 1959. But we all belong. We're all part of what makes this country wonderful. And I think we need to push against stereotypes that say, we're dangerous, we're lazy, we're criminals, and to celebrate just the fact that I think we're also a wonderful culture, a culture that values family, a culture that values education, a culture that values sacrifice, and that those are all wonderful qualities to embrace and to celebrate about Latinx people.
I think it's important to celebrate Latinx heritage because we should not be erased nor silent just because we are seen as aliens or less than. Latinx heritage should be honored and celebrated, not just this month, but every other month, along with Black History Month. Latinx and Black individuals obviously experience discrimination, inequality, and injustices every day. Latinx heritage means to me that I can connect to my culture and identity while sharing my cultures, traditions, and values with those who are not part of the Latinx heritage community.
Any other thoughts from our panelists on that question?
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to speak.
Oh, no, go ahead, Manjeet.
Oh, yeah, I was going to speak to that. I'm not part of the Latinx community, but I think as an ally, it's so important for me to be showing up and doing my own work and understanding and learning about the Latinx community. And so I think, events like this and, Heritage Months are so important because it gives you the opportunity to start doing that and then continue doing that work even when it's not Latinx Heritage Month, and continue being an ally in that way actively. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to speak to your experiences.
Thank you.
Next question is specifically about our sophomores learned a little bit about who they are and myths that we sometimes hear about them. Could anyone speak? Students should know about them.
Thank you, Alexa. It was kind of hard to hear you, but I can go ahead and reread it. Can everybody hear me all right? All right, so her question is, in the sophomores last week, we're able to learn a little bit about migrant workers, who they are, the myths that sometimes we hear about them. So could anyone speak on what it means to be a migrant worker and what high school students should know about migrant workers?
So my parents were migrant workers as kids. In fact, that's how my family got here, because my father happened to be born in a migrant worker camp. My mother remembers planting orange trees as a little kid in California, actually started school in California, and that's how she learned English. But both families moved back to Mexico, and then that's why we were able to come in 1959. I think the biggest thing you need to know is migrant workers are amazingly hard workers, and they pass that trait on to their children, but none of them want their children to be migrant workers. My parents, by the time I was born, my father was a day laborer with the railroad. My mother was a seamstress. And but they had big dreams for their children and huge believers in education and in wanting the best for their children, the next generation. I think one of their constant messages to me was, you're not going to do this. You're not going to work this hard. You're going to get educated, and you're going to take this family to the next level. So I've always appreciated that migrant workers are great dreamers.
I had uncles and aunts that were migrant workers. They were working in farms before they actually officially stayed in Oregon. I don't know if you guys know about the Bracero program, which started in 1942 when Mexico and the United States, they had a Mexican farm labor agreement, and they only earned 30 cents an hour. And that lasted till like the 1964. There was about 4.6 million Mexicans that were temporarily working on farms. And my uncles were part of that program. They kept going back and forth from Mexico to the United States. And because of that program, they were finally able to get citizenship. But a lot of the people that were working in the Bracero program were really mistreated, and they weren't earning any benefits or protected time off. And another thing about migrant workers is, I don't know if you guys know about the Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez movement, about when they started the National Farm Workers Association to fight for their rights as farm workers, because they weren't being treated fairly and they weren't getting paid enough. And it wasn't just led by them. There was also like a population of Filipinos, I think, that were also working in the farms. And I feel like being a migrant worker, they face a lot of discrimination, aren't treated fairly. They don't have access to welfare, just like a normal employees. They don't get benefits. And it's really hard for them to find a job when that's the only job that they really have, especially if they don't have citizenship.
I can talk a little bit about migrant workers in the context of COVID, actually, because migrant workers have been really uniquely hit by COVID. So to the points that the other panelists are making, migrant workers work really hard, and they work really hard jobs. And they are 100% essential jobs, and they're treated as though they are unessential. And it's just a way that folks maintain, white supremacist thinking and power and control over colonized communities. And it's the reality of how migrant workers ended up becoming victims of COVID in a much bigger way than the average community or communities outside of migrant farm worker communities, not only in infection rates, but also unfortunately in death rates. And that's true in Oregon as well. It's very, very bleak, in fact. And now with the wildfires, we've seen a lot of migrant workers or folks who work as migrant workers during certain seasons who have been displaced from Southern Oregon. So you're seeing this like just scaffold tragedy and trauma that folks are experiencing. And a lot of that comes from exactly what Yadira was saying about, just the stigma, the assumptions, all of these things that go along with making it so that the United States can maintain exploitation over migrant farm workers and pay them very little wages while they're producing the absolute one thing that we need besides air and water. And so I think that that's really something that we need to understand. At Catholic Charities, for example, something that I always find really appalling is the fact that we take food out to migrant farm workers. And I just want to say that again, we take food out to the people who are producing food because they're not being paid well enough by the farmers to buy the food that they're picking. And so then it comes to Portland, and then we have to get somebody to buy it, some sort of donation or something, to take it back to the people who produced it. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely nonsensical. When you take the food down to folks, they're just like, great, thanks for bringing it back, And so it's a very complex, very deliberate system of exploitation that migrant farm workers are unfortunately stuck in. And I think something else that folks need to understand about migrant farm workers is the term migrant farm worker is very obviously significant. It means folks are usually moving with the season or moving with a particular crop and that sort of things. But migrant farm workers aren't the only farm workers. There are permanent farm workers in the United States, and they face similar, though not the same challenges that migrant farm workers face. That'll be my spiel on that.
Thank you. You segued us perfectly. The next question from Sid. Sid, do you want to read it? It was basically about—
Yeah, I know we kind of just went over this, but going off that conversation, how has COVID-19 affected the migrant worker population?
So again, I'll say, and then I'll let other folks do it, but migrant farm workers have been extremely heavily hit, not only by COVID infections and COVID deaths, but because of social distancing requirements made by the state, everybody is now receiving a lot less work than before. And so people are what we now would call underemployed. And so they can't plan for the same things that they would plan for typically, because they can kind of have an idea of how much they're going to be earning in a season. That's not the case anymore, because now folks, instead of having 6 or 7 folks working in a certain area in a field, now it's 2 or 3 folks. And so folks aren't getting paid as much. The other thing is that we're seeing farmers putting clusters of COVID infected folks out in the field because folks don't have the same access. They have the same right, but they don't have the same access to healthcare. And so folks will then be also, they'll go and experience social isolation inside of a farm worker housing unit, which typically, which depends on the farm, but in Oregon, often you'll see like large barrack type farm worker housing, or you see smaller ones that many families are living in together. And so social isolation and social distancing is really hard in those circumstances. And by hard, I mean impossible. And so folks will get sick. And so the state invested about $80 million in what they called agricultural security for COVID. And so with that, they were able to provide some PPE out in farms while folks are working. They were able to provide some money for hotels so that folks could go and self-isolate if they needed to in a hotel. Didn't bring any money or food along with that, so it didn't help with get the kids to school. So not a lot of folks actually were able to use that. A lot of times, if you just throw money at a problem without looking at the infrastructure, you're still in big trouble. And that's what happened there. But something very positive that happened in Oregon was the Oregon Workers Relief Fund. And I'm not sure if folks have heard of that, but it was a lot of really hard work by a lot of allies of undocumented workers in particular. Migrant workers are not always undocumented. Often they're in different areas of their immigration status. And so with the Oregon Workers Relief Fund, folks were able to tap into that to get cash to help pay back rent expenses or utilities or things like that. So while the community has been very heavily hit by COVID for the same reasons I mentioned to you before, white supremacist perspectives and wanting to use power and control to maintain exploitation of workers, there has been fighting back against the virus and against that exploitation so we can try to get folks resources. And I'll let somebody else answer from there.
Sure, I can speak to that. I've seen similar patterns in my organizing work over the past few months. As was mentioned earlier, I think it's important to acknowledge the intersection of the migrant worker population and the undocumented population, which don't always overlap, of course. But when we look at that intersection, we see that the exploitation taking place during these times of COVID is exacerbated even further. One thing we've seen at our organization is a lot of our community members who are undocumented and work either in agriculture or similar kind of trades didn't qualify for the stimulus check that was sent out earlier during COVID. And so that was, and on top of that, don't usually qualify for unemployment benefits. So it doesn't make sense for them to leave their work. So they kind of end up in this place where the work that they do is one that makes them extremely vulnerable to catching this infection. But at the same time, leaving work doesn't make sense because they can't, they don't benefit from some of the systems that have been put in place for citizens or residents of the United States. So it makes it really challenging and difficult, and it ends up being on a lot of these community organizations to help fundraise and get these people the resources that they need and make sure that they're safe in these really scary times. So I know that the government has like certain programs, but at the same time, a lot of communities are wary of, giving their information out to those groups and are afraid of the backlash that could come with that. So it's a really complicated situation. And I think, of course, in this kind of area and all other areas, COVID-19 is really highlighting the many flaws and injustices in our system and how those really come out in in these sorts of times. So
Thank you. All right, Natalie, you want to go on to the next question? Is Natalie here? Can you unmute yourself? All right, I think we lost Natalie, but the next question, primarily for Ms. Kelly and Ms. Kaur, oh, there you are. Do you want to ask it? Natalie, do you want to unmute yourself? We're confused. I'll keep asking it. What have your organizations done for migrant workers during the pandemic? And are there any other specific struggles this time period, like politics or climate change or anything else? So we've touched on that a little bit, but maybe some more specifics around that would be great.
Manjeet, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
you can go ahead. I can go.
Okay. So Catholic Charities, we've maintained all of our services. Under COVID, we've obviously increased our disaster response services, and farm workers in particular have been a large priority of ours for a number of reasons. One, they're the majority of the folks that we serve outside of the Multnomah County area, and the disproportionate effects that COVID has had on folks. We are one of 4 farm worker housing providers in the nonprofit farm worker housing providers, which guarantees folks safe, clean farm worker housing. And so that's of importance to us. And then we also are one of 5 immigration legal service nonprofits who offers pro bono immigration legal services to folks. And so we have been very, very busy trying to do food response in particular for migrant farm workers who are in housing that has seen infection rates. And so in order to make it so that farm workers don't have to go out into community, we go directly to farm workers and we bring them big boxes of food every week. We serve about 2,000 people every week through that food distribution, specifically folks who are in farm country and who are either unable to work because they have to self-isolate or because they have been impacted. We also distribute flexible funding to cover rent assistance and utilities. In fact, right before I got on with you, I was on the phone with a farm worker getting ready to pay his utilities because his wife, and all 3 children had been infected with COVID, and they can't go back to work. And the kids are okay, but his lungs are shot forever. And so, and he's also been, somebody who has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Exposed to pesticides. So we're looking at, social justice and social determinants of health from a racial justice and race equity lens. For farm workers, environmental justice is a huge issue there. And so if you're looking at and you're like piling on all the all the environmental justice issues that go along with migrant workers on top of COVID, it's a deep rabbit hole to go down for sure. So we are trying to address each of these issues. We also most recently, because of the wildfires in Oregon, we've spent a lot of time in Medford. We've served folks statewide in our Immigration Legal Services Department. And surprisingly, and it's always when disaster strikes, we have new things come up that we didn't think of, but everybody lost their papers when the trailers burned down. So you lost your kids' passports, citizenship cards, you lost your green card, you lost maybe, all of these things. Now we've been doing immigration legal services for 20 years. I never would have thought of a wildfire wiping out people's stuff. So that's bad news. You cannot be missing your papers, especially right now. And so we've been going down and doing what we call their Know Your Rights charters, like discussions, chats, where we're telling folks, this is what you are able to do. We're trying to replace those papers. We're trying to see if we can find any relief options for folks. And then we're also doing mental health charters for folks who are very, very impacted by the fires, by pandemic, and then by the constant threat of state harassment under ICE. So that's a lot of what we're doing. We're also working on some policy stuff. We are working really closely with the governor's office to renew what we call universal representation, which is pro bono services for people in deportation. And so right now we're after this meeting, I'll be talking with the governor's office about getting that done. So we'll see how that goes. And then we've also been just working with some of our partners. I believe Unite actually has been really involved in some of this policy work. Not I believe, Unite has been very involved in a lot of this policy work as well, around trying to make sure that now that the Oregon Workers Relief Fund has dried up, what's next for folks who we're going to need some help because COVID's not over, and it's certainly not over for migrant workers. So I'll kick that over to Manjeet.
Yeah, like Kat mentioned, Unite Oregon, we also work across the state. So we've seen layers of impacts that these different events, COVID-19, the wildfires, racial injustice that has existed obviously before all of this taking place, and kind of compounding and making each other even worse. So we've kind of taken some direct measures. We started a COVID-19 immigrant and refugee relief fund. So we fundraised from just community members, but also from community stakeholders to try to raise a fund that we could distribute in a similar way that I think Kat mentioned her organization does, is we do intakes with people and give them flexible aid so that they can pay their rent, their utilities, food, things like that. Because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of them don't qualify for government assistance and didn't receive a stimulus check, but still might be out of work, or still might have their work hours adjusted. So that's something we've done to kind of help directly. And we also started a wildfire relief fund because we saw that a lot of these communities, especially when the fires hit, which affected parts of Clackamas County as well as the Rogue Valley area in Southern Oregon, we made sure that we wanted to take care of those folks as well. And so a lot of people, actually, we heard stories from community members who were seeking assistance and talking about how because of COVID and because of job loss, they had to cancel their renter's insurance or cancel their home insurance. And then those their homes and apartments were affected by the fires. And so everything was kind of just, like I said, compounding. So I think at a time like now, funding is really important, and our organization is trying as much as possible to get funding from the state to distribute, getting grants to do direct service work, and also education and outreach work around COVID. So that's kind of been one of our main organizing goals over the past few months.
I know that Centro Cultural, I volunteer with them sometimes. They're giving the Centro Esperanza Relief Fund. And then I know that LULAC, they also are doing farm worker justice and justice for migrant women join forces by calling the legislators, the federal level, to protect working families, because they know, like what you guys said, like it's really bad right now. So they're just like contacting legislators, like, you guys need to make policies to do something about it, because sometimes the resources that are around aren't enough. Like they either run out of the relief fund, or they don't have enough funding, or etc. So it's important to have legislators also be involved in this movement, so that they can help out legally in case the resources run out.
Thank you very much. This question is for everyone. What does it mean to be an ally for the Latinx community? Why and how should the LaSalle community get involved?
Well, I just say get educated. I think the best way to be an ally is to know the truth. Now, I'm not telling you how to vote, but I'm saying you have people that you can influence by becoming as educated as you can. And the panelists today did an amazing job. And then speaking that truth to other people. Do not underestimate the influence that you can have on others, and to truly shape the future, and to help people to see people, not statistics, not misconceptions, but to see people, real people who, just like you, just want the best they can provide for their family, want the same things you want, to see another person worthy of dignity because they're a child of God.
For me, I'm not just being an ally for my community, I'm also being an ally for myself and my families. And like Nick said, like we shouldn't just educate ourselves on the Latinx community, we should also educate ourselves on, Indigenous community, Black community, because we can't always be into one group. We have to be aware of all issues, because all the issues that occur to us are very intersected. So like sexism, racism, ableism, all those issues, they're all very interconnected. A way that high school students can really get involved is just go out to your state, like the Capitol in Salem, and do lobbies, like speak out to why this bill is important for you, why this bill is important to the Latinx community, why this bill is important to the Black community. You guys can also create your own bill, actually, because policies start with ideas. You just have to go and talk to a representative and get people to sponsor it. You can also just volunteer with other resources, like the Catholic Charities. You can probably volunteer with them. The Unite Oregon, you can also volunteer with them. And volunteering also looks really good in your resume. So when you guys want to go to college, that looks really good in your resume. Other things,
I'm in Colorado right now. Where I'm sitting used to be Mexico. So before, this is in parts going all the way up to Oregon, like we have to know that, like when we're talking about knowing Latina Heritage Month, like you can't not know it. You can't not know it. And if you choose not to know it, and if you choose not to celebrate it, then you're actively choosing to ignore human beings who are sitting right next to you. And you're actively choosing to at least be complicit to the human rights atrocities that we're seeing right now. And they are atrocities. So I think it's also important to not only pay attention to the pain community's experience, because I think particularly white folks like myself, we tend to focus on the pain of Black and brown people, and it's really problematic. I think we also have to look at and celebrate the amazing strengths and contributions and other parts of, you have to look at the whole. You can't just look at one thing and be like, oh, the Latino community is so, yes, and also a strong, thriving, amazing community who's led and created all of these things that we're sitting here living in right now. So I think it's important to celebrate these things so that everybody has the appreciation of the dynamic nature of human beings.
Yeah, I would just echo what all the panelists before me have said. I think I really commend all of you for putting together a panel like this, and taking the initiative to have all of us be in such an educational space and invite others to kind of tune into that conversation. I think these types of formats are so important for building allyship and having like space to share stories and information and exchange knowledge in that way. And I think like other people have mentioned, of course, voting and lobbying and doing things at the state and federal level are so important, even locally. Participating in that way. I know maybe not everyone here is old enough to vote, but you can still affect change in in campaigns around you. You can organize and even beyond voting, I think voting is kind of just the first step. Like, I think it's important to vote and organize your community and educate and activate the spaces around you. So this is kind of an example of doing something like that. So I think continuing that type of work is how you can stay involved. Yeah.
If you can't vote, you can donate too. And I really encourage everybody to exercise their donor activism. In fact, I know Unite could use it. Catholic Charities could. The mechas in your neighborhood or in your schools, mechas could use that for sure. Find a place and use your donor activism if you can't vote. And even after, when you can vote, vote and donor activism.
That kind of leads us right into our next question. Lastly, before we open it up to anyone else with a question they might have, we are hoping to practice our allyship and advocacy work after this conversation. Is there anything your organization specifically need at this time? We are happy to run a donation drive or fundraiser.
We need food at Catholic Charities. We need culturally specific and responsive food. I have a grocery list that we send out to folks that's responsive to many, not all, people from Mexico and the Northern Triangle. I'd be happy to send that out, and we'll take anything you guys can, anything you got.
We can do that for sure. Anything for Unite Oregon or anything else that we could do?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, so right now Unite is building its base in Clackamas County. We're trying to get as many community members kind of in our email system and communication system as possible. So maybe I can send out, we have like a Google form where you or anyone in your family or your community could fill out your email and phone number, so we can just have your contact information and share the resources that we've been working on, whether that's regarding COVID-19, or we have other kind of focus groups and events coming up that we organize around housing justice and environmental justice and things of that nature. So we're always looking for folks to come out to that. And we always have Spanish interpreters and even interpreters in other languages like Arabic and Burmese and other languages that are commonly spoken in the county. So yeah, maybe I can send that information to someone who can get that out to your high school. But yeah, that we're looking for community members who are who can help us spread our resources and information. Yeah.
I know that Adelante Mujeres, they need a lot of like donations right now, but you don't have to travel. They're located in Cornelius, which is close to Forest Grove, which is in Washington County. And then Centro Cultural, they also do a lot of food donations. So if you guys want to like send them food, that's also fine. Again, they're located in Washington County.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, these are things that we as a community can definitely work on. We have our sophomores who are diving a little deeper into it, and then anybody else who wants to get involved, we'll open that up and have this kind of action piece happen hopefully next week. I'm so grateful for these discussions, and we do have time to open it up to anybody who might have a question. It could be in the Q&A. I don't know, panelists, can you see the Q&A questions? Are you able to see those? Mr. McLaughlin, I also unmuted you, so you should be able to ask if you want to just go ahead and ask a question, then anybody else can pop in as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited that you're doing this panel, and I would love to hear from members of our Latinx community. What are some of the things you love about Latinx culture that you'd like us to know about?
I think I love food. I love Mexican food. I love the way food is how you welcome people. I love the music. I love the sense of home. You could be in anybody's any Latinx home, and they're going to feed you within 5 minutes. There's always music. There's a great sense of family and welcome. I think in the Latinx community, they never met a stranger. And honestly, I miss that. as I make my way out in the world. Yeah, and yeah, that sense of comfort.
For me, it would be the fact that I can code switch to Spanish and English and speak Spanglish within my cousins, family members, and friends within that community. Another thing is las fiestas, las quinceañeras. If you guys know what a quinceañera is when a girl turns 15 and now she's officially a woman and she has to go to church and like be with God and do a whole ceremony, and then they have like a huge party after and have all the madrinas, the godmothers, and the godfathers. So partying, I guess.
Thank you so much. I'm actually smiling really big over here right now. How about for some of the folks in the Unidos Club at LaSalle? What are some of the things you love?
I think for me personally, being in the Unidos, it's my first year, but I can already tell just from being on Zoom calls with all the people in the Unitas Club, like we're all so close and we want to support each other, and we want to find ways to support outside local businesses. And I think it's really cool how we interact with Miss Mendez, especially. She's very supportive, and I think she's really a big part of like why we are the way that we are and the like tightness and bond that we have created with each other.
I think to add on to what Bella said, I really do agree with that. I've been president of the Latino Club for 2 years now, and I just love how we're all so close with each other. We bond with each other, even with these whole on Zoom calls. We're just all bonding, and Ms. Mendez really does play a really good part in this whole entire club. She motivates us, she inspires us to keep on going, and to just get our voices out there. So I think that's what makes it, and like she makes us, she like makes it for a way for it not to be all her, but all of us. Like have it be about us and our culture and what matters. She just like gives us that form of motivation, and we motivate each other to do better, which is like that's just something I think, and it's not just in like in Unidos Club. I think that's just like in our culture, we motivate each other to do a lot of things, and like I know like my cousins motivate me a lot to do like to continue with school, because first of all, like my parents didn't finish like high school, so I'm gonna be first generation. My parents never went to college, so having that motivation from even like my older cousins just saying, oh no, continue with school, let's prove people that we can actually do something. That really does motivate me. So I think that's something that I'm really proud of. So from our culture. So
And if you have any questions about like higher education, I'm also here to support you guys because I'm also first generation. My parents never went to college. I'm the first one in my whole family to actually go to a private university. So you guys can contact me or see me as support system, because the higher education system is predominantly white, and for first generation, it's really hard for us to navigate through our whole university. So I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
Are you able to leave your information in the chat for people who want to use it? Thank you.
We do have time for more questions if anybody wants to type one in or send me a message and I can unmute you on my end. Unless you can unmute yourselves. I'm so confused about that, but we do have more time, a little bit more time.
Yeah, for some reason, it won't let me type into the Q&A. I can see the question and answers and I can reply to the answer,
Okay.
but I go into the chat. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
Someone can just like type, what's your email? And then I'll just respond to it.
That makes sense. I can pass it on too if we miss it. I did have a question that could work for probably all of you. Being a Catholic and Lasallian school, and I know Yadi, you are a Lasallian grad as well. How does your faith intersect in this community and in this activism? Where does your faith and spirituality and God play a role in what it means to be Latinx, to be a part of your community, to be an activist, if that makes sense?
For me, it's like ever since I went to De La Salle, you know, enter to learn, leave to serve. That really got stuck to me because it's not, for me, I feel like some people do it for the clout, like activism and stuff to get population and media or whatnot. But for me, I do it because I care about people and, you know, it's God's work. Like we have to serve people and be compassionate and have empathy for people because of the structure and the way society is built for us. And not everyone has it easy. And we need to have open hearts and open hands and be able to help everyone. It's just like, I think I don't remember, but it's kind of like when Jesus was cleaning, I forgot whose feet it was. Um, it's similar, it's kind of work like that. And then when Jesus goes out and like feeds the homeless and gives someone who can't see vision, it's like similar work, you know? So De La Salle really helped me out in that, even though I didn't do well as a high school student, and the activism work and being able to do social justice work, it really inspired me. And I'm very passionate about helping people, not just in the Latinx community, but in the Indigenous and Black community and Native Americans and, you know, Asian Pacific Islanders and all that, because we're all constantly experiencing these oppressions in different ways. And it's important to have each other because we can't always depend on the big people. Like we can't always depend, like right now I go to Pacific University and I can't always depend on the president because, like, you know, she's a white lady. She doesn't know my experience as a first generation. And there's been a lot of marginalized issues with students at this school, first generation especially, that have been silent by the president because the president doesn't want to ruin Pacific University's reputation, which I understand, but like we want the school to be better, to be more welcoming, and to have a better support system for marginalized students in the higher education system. So yeah.
I think that my experience of a Lasallian education when I went to high school in El Paso as like you, a first generation, it was the most liberating experience of my life. And I think we were encouraged to not focus on limitations, but to just presume we deserved everything everybody else deserved. That our zip code and the color of our skin and our last name were not limitations. And that was so transformative that I'm sure that that has a huge part to play in why I eventually became a De La Salle Christian Brother, and why I have really enjoyed working with Latinx populations at a Cristo Rey school like De La Salle North Catholic. San Miguel is that in Tucson, Arizona. The majority of them first generation, and work in my hometown of El Paso, where 20% of our student body crosses every day. So I think, yeah, so you're so grateful, you have to pay it forward, and in whatever way you can. And so I would say my activism has been, you know, through school.
I'll just talk from the perspective of a faith-based organization, or coming from a faith-based organization, which I think is unique.
I saw a question. It says which books or films or documentaries would I recommend or stuff like that. I think a film that I would recommend is Under the Same Moon. That movie really does at least hit home for my family. You know, my dad hasn't seen his parents for like a long time. My dad came at 14, so my dad was very young when he immigrated here. So he hasn't seen his parents in a really in a while. And I think if I could make that dream come true for him, I mean, I would take that chance. But unfortunately, you know, under circumstances right now, it's really hard. But I think that movie is a really like with a heavy heart. Like I cried like 2 times. Like I watched the movie 2 times and I cried every time because that movie is just it really hits home. So I think that movie, I would really recommend that. That's where I'm gonna leave it at. So yeah.
Thank you, Alexa. Ms. Kelly, did you want to, I think both of you started talking at the same time. If you wanted to jump back in, that would be great.
I was just going to talk about it from like by the way, Under the Same Moon is an amazing movie. You're absolutely right. And everyone should watch it. And actually Los Tigres del Norte make a little appearance in that show. It's real good. So I think it's really important to look at the Catholic Charities perspective. We come from a Catholic social teaching perspective, right? And so of course, we're giving deference to the poor. We're looking at concepts of solidarity, these kinds of things. We don't only serve Catholics, right? We don't serve you because you're Catholic. We serve you because we're Catholic, right? And so we are able to connect with people across faiths and identities. But I will say that as a Catholic person working often with a lot of the migrant farm workers I work with are Catholic, and that comes out in certain cultures in different ways than it does. And in some cultures, that connection to Catholicism is part of every sentence or every conversation or every, you know, you get off the phone with somebody, oh, que Dios les bendiga, right? Like that's just, or gracias a Dios me siento bien, you know, like that's just, it's just the way you communicate. And so it's part of a cultural understanding because of the connection, the religious connection and the connection to the church. And even folks who, and I'm talking specifically from folks from, like the Northern Triangle in Mexico. Of course, these are not all where migrant farm workers come from, but that cultural component and that cultural understanding that can create a lot of connection that folks don't feel they have. Families that I was working with, and I'm sure Brother Nick can speak to this too, families who I've worked with on the border, one of the first things that they do to break people down before they put them in detention is they take their symbols of religiosity. So I worked with a lot of families who had lost their rosaries and had them broken in front of them, or lost their prayer books or their santos or their cards or whatever. And in fact, one of the first things that people asked us when we were headed down to Medford last week was we were saying, like, we're bringing food, we're bringing mental health therapists, we're bringing immigration attorneys, what else do you need? And they were like, rosaries and Bibles, we lost them. And they felt comfortable asking that because we're Catholic Charities. I don't know if they feel comfortable asking another organization that, to be honest. And I don't ever want us, you know, we don't pontificate, we don't preach, we don't do it. We just carry Catholic social teaching out with us as we work. And I think people feel that. And it is a really essential part of our work. And it's an essential part of me as an ally to the community to be able to connect in a different way. I go to Spanish language mass. St. Andrew's is my faith home. And I go to Spanish language mass because it's where I feel comfortable going to mass and all of that. And I think that it helps you to understand the cultural components of like so many complex cultural components, because in Oregon, we have a tendency, and I'll get off my soapbox on this, but it really makes me irritated. In Oregon, we have a tendency, especially inside of white communities, to belittle religiosity. And that comes absolutely from a racialized place, and don't think that that's not true. So then you end up having condescending white folks who are like, oh, religious people. And who is that directed at in Oregon, guys? I mean, the majority of religious people in Oregon are not white folks. And so I think that that's really important for us to keep in mind too. So we're bringing together Catholic social teaching, and we're looking at religiosity and access to spirituality and culturally defined and manifested spirituality as a human right. And so I think that we need to make sure that we are bringing that with us in all of our interactions with other people.
I want to answer a question really quickly. Someone had asked about how we can like support or like celebrate different places by doing not charity, but like trying to find ways to support places. Just wanted to put it out there that some of the ways that you can support businesses is by just looking into them. And I'm sure we can make a list and like send that out to students if they're interested. But a way that the Unidos Club is trying to provide just support to a lot of businesses that aren't doing so great right now due to COVID is we're going to try to set up times to just go and get dinner or lunch at a restaurant. So like some places like Cha 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 down in Milwaukee, they're a really great place to go because they also have a lot of stuff like shoes that people from Mexico have made, or dresses, and it's just really pretty. And there's a bunch of art there that you can buy and stuff. And another place is La Carreta. They make amazing food, and currently aren't doing too well because of COVID. So yeah, just find ways to try to get yourself out and eat at places and stuff. And I think that question got deleted or something, but I did see it at some point.
Thank you, Bella. There's a couple other questions in the chat. One about being new to celebrating Latinx heritage. So what is something to share with others around these certain times? And then maybe a little deeper dive into the term Latinx that is being discussed and evaluated. So we do have time for those two, and then we'll cut it off at there. I know we started a little bit late, but if anybody wants to speak on those two questions before we wrap it up, that would be awesome.
I will talk, because I think I brought up the Latinx thing. I want to just say, as an ally to the community, as somebody who does not speak Spanish as my first language, it's my second language. I don't have the right to have an opinion about it, and I don't. But I do listen when I talk with folks, and a lot of folks feel very empowered by the term Latinx, and a lot of folks don't feel so empowered by the term Latinx and prefer using Latino or Latina, like kind of with a dash. And other folks are saying, I prefer Latine. There also is this is kind of from the mid 2000s, the like arroba, where like folks would do the Latino. And so I just think it's important to acknowledge, especially for folks who are not members of the community, that all intentions that are good intentions, but it's important to listen to the diversity. And, you know, Latinx came from efforts, very real, very important efforts to be as inclusive as possible, not only around gender binary identities, but also trans and non-conforming identities. And it also makes it so that you don't generalize when you're saying like Latino, and you're just saying like, oh, well, there's 100 men and one woman, and we're saying Latinos, and race is outright. Like, so we're looking at all the complexities of that conversation. But if you're looking at the word Latino, if you're even using that in English, you're using it wrong. Because in Spanish, you say La Comunidad Latina. So already we've misgendered it when we're speaking in English. And so I think that it's really important that we identify those things. So Latinx is really great. And then I've gotten like scathing. I have a friend who's a very good friend who's very anti the term Latinx. She's a gay woman from Puerto Rico who identifies as gender non-binary, but still woman at the same time. And she's like, that is a colonizer term to me. She's like, you need to use Latinx. She's like, nobody can use X in conversation, which is, you know, it's not wrong. So anyway, I just want to say that real quick, that I don't have an opinion. I'm saying that I hear all of these opinions from folks who I'm close to in the community or who I work with professionally. And I can tell you, I'm not referring to one of the señoras who I'm bringing food to as Señor X. I can't do that. So I think that we just have to understand the complexities of language and understand that language is malleable, it's flexible, it should be, and everyone has the right to define themselves as they see fit. And we have to respect that, and we have to follow that as we can.
Can you spell that term for me?
Latine. Latine. And it's actually a lot easier when you're like in conversation, you're like, oh, pues, you know, estaba hablando con mis amigues. Because you can't say amiguexes. I mean, you can, to me, it gets stuck. And maybe that's because Spanish is my second language. Like I can't switch like that. But saying like amigues instead of like amigos or amigas, that makes sense to me. Same thing if you're like conjugating, like, you know what I'm saying. So that's what I'm hearing more and more from like gender and queer activists coming from Central America and Mexico. And then Latinx is more, this is what I'm experiencing. This is not universal, and I'm not reporting this as fact. I'm saying what I know. And then Latinx is more common in the United States. And generationally, there's very different generational perspectives on that term as well. And I think that's important to notice. But again, as an ally, I don't have opinions. I just have experiences, and I'm sharing them with you.
Thank you. All right, are there any closing thoughts or questions or conversations, especially from our panelists and our Student Council and Unidos Club members?
I just want to say thank you. This has been a really inspirational hour for me. I'm pretty much the only Latine up here at Mont LaSalle and new to California and new to really a whole nother culture. And I just want to appreciate how at home you made me feel today. And thank you.
Thank you, brother.
I just quickly wanted to say, oops, sorry.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead, Mary Grace.
I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much for all of the panelists. I know that I'm speaking for student council as well as exec. I just wanted to say thank you. All of your insights are truly incredible. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming today and such an inspirational and powerful hour session.
All right, well, we will close this the way we began, and that's in prayer. So if I can hand things over to Natalie and you can unmute yourself and read your prayer.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you from the Anitas Club because I am the junior president. We're just so happy to be sending out information to the community and getting like information from the panelists. It was very interesting and it was very nice to hear other people's perspectives of like what my family has gone through. So let us remember
that we're in the holy presence of God.
This is a quote by Srinivas Mishra. The lockdown has been a long haul in the battle against coronavirus, but the migrants are suffering from the worst, hitting the hardest. It is very painful and hidden. St. John the Baptist de La Salle.
Pray for us.
Live Jesus in our hearts.
Forever. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We will be in touch, especially about food donations or getting resources out there for Unite Oregon. We'll very much be looking forward to taking this into an action piece and getting involved. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please connect with us anytime if there's anything else we can do. And I'll really appreciate all of that. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.